Section 56 of the Book of Household Management. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Christine Blashford. The Book of Household Management by Isabella Beeton. Recipes. Chapter 25, Part 3. Baked Spanish Onions, 1129. Ingredients. 4 or 5 Spanish onions, salt, and water. Mode. Put the onions with their skins on into a saucepan of boiling water slightly salted, and let them boil quickly for an hour. Then take them out, wipe them thoroughly, wrap each one in a piece of paper separately, and bake them in a moderate oven for 2 hours or longer, should the onions be very large. They may be served in their skins and eaten with a piece of cold butter and a seasoning of pepper and salt, or they may be peeled and a good brown gravy poured over them. Time, 1 hour to boil, 2 hours to bake. Average cost, medium-sized, 2d each, sufficient for 5 or 6 persons, seasonable from September to January. The genus Allium. The onion, like the leek, garlic, and shallot, belongs to the genus Allium, which is a numerous species of vegetable, and every one of them possesses, more or less, a volatile and acrid penetrating principle, pricking the thin transparent membrane of the eyelids, and all are very similar in their properties. In the whole of them, the bulb is the most active part, and any one of them may supply the place of the other, for they are all irritant, excitant, and vesicant. With many, the onion is a very great favourite, and is considered an extremely nutritive vegetable. The Spanish kind is frequently taken for supper, it being simply boiled and then seasoned with salt, pepper, and butter. Some dredge on a little flour, but many prefer it without this. Burnt onions for gravies, 1130. Ingredients. Half a pound of onions, a third a pint of water, half a pound of moist sugar, third of a pint of vinegar. Mode. Peel and chop the onions fine, and put them into a stewpan, not tinned, with the water. Let them boil for 5 minutes, then add the sugar, and simmer gently until the mixture becomes nearly black and throws out bubbles of smoke. Have ready the above proportion of boiling vinegar, strain the liquor gradually to it, and keep stirring with a wooden spoon until it is well incorporated. When cold, bottle for use. Time, altogether, 1 hour. Properties of the onion. The onion is possessed of a white, acrid, volatile oil, holding sulphur in solution, albumin, a good deal of uncrystallizable sugar and mucilage, phosphoric acid, both free and combined with lime, acetic acid, citrate of lime, and lignin. Of all the species of allium, the onion has the volatile principle in the greatest degree, and hence it is impossible to separate the scales of the root without the eyes being affected. The juice is sensibly acid, and is capable of being, by fermentation, converted into vinegar, and mixed with water or the dregs of beer, yields by distillation an alcoholic liquor. Although used as a common esculent, onions are not suited to all stomachs. There are some who cannot eat them either fried or roasted, whilst others prefer them boiled, which is the best way of using them, as by the process they then undergo they are deprived of their essential oil. The pulp of roasted onions with oil forms an excellent anodyne and emollient poultice to suppurating tumours. Stewed Spanish onions, 1131. Ingredients. 5 or 6 Spanish onions, 1 pint of good broth or gravy. Mode. Peel the onions, taking care not to cut away too much of the tops or tails, or they would then fall to pieces. Put them into a stewpan capable of holding them at the bottom without piling them one on top of the other. Add the broth or gravy, and simmer very gently until the onions are perfectly tender. Dish them, pour the gravy round, and serve. Instead of using broth, Spanish onions may be stewed with a large piece of butter. They must be done very gradually over a slow fire or hot plate, and will produce plenty of gravy. Time. To stew in gravy, 2 hours, or longer if very large. Average cost, medium-sized, 2d each. Sufficient for 6 or 7 persons. Seasonable from September to January. Note. Stewed Spanish onions are a favourite accompaniment to roast shoulder of mutton. Origin of the onion. This vegetable is thought to have originally come from India, through Egypt, where it became an object of worship. Thence it was transmitted to Greece, thence to Italy, and ultimately it was distributed throughout Europe, in almost every part of which it has, from time immemorial, been cultivated. In warm climates it is found to be less acrid and much sweeter than in colder latitudes, and in Spain it is not at all unusual to see a peasant munching an onion, as an Englishman would an apple. Spanish onions, which are imported to this country during the winter months, are, when properly roasted, perfectly sweet and equal to many preserves. Boiled parsnips, 1132. Ingredients. Parsnips. To each gallon of water allow 1 heaped tablespoonful of salt. Mode. Wash the parsnips, scrape them thoroughly, and with the point of the knife remove any black specks about them, and should they be very large, cut the thick part into quarters. Put them into a saucepan of boiling water, salted in the above proportion. Boil them rapidly until tender, which may be ascertained by thrusting a fork in them. Take them up, drain them, and serve them in a vegetable dish. This vegetable is usually served with salt fish, boiled pork, or boiled beef. When sent to table with the latter, a few should be placed alternately with carrots around the dish as a garnish. Time. Large parsnips 1 to 1 1/2 hours, small ones half to 1 hour. Average cost 1d. each. Sufficient. Allow 1 for each person. Seasonable from October to May. The parsnip. This vegetable is found wild in meadows all over Europe, and in England is met with very frequently on dry banks in chalky soil. In its wild state, the root is white, mucilaginous, aromatic, and sweet, with some degree of acrimony. When old, it has been known to cause vertigo. Willis relates that a whole family fell into delirium from having eaten of its roots, and cattle never touch it in its wild state. In domestic economy, the parsnip is much used, and is found to be a highly nutritious vegetable. In times of scarcity, an excellent bread has been made from the roots, and they also furnish an excellent wine, resembling the Malmsey of Madeira and the Canaries. A spirit is also obtained from them in as great quantities as from carrots. The composition of the parsnip root has been found to be 79.4 of water, 0.9 starch and fibre, 6.1 gum, 5.5 sugar, and 2.1 of albumin. Boiled green peas, 1133. Ingredients. Green peas. To each half a gallon of water allow 1 small teaspoonful of moist sugar, 1 heaped tablespoonful of salt. Mode. This delicious vegetable, to be eaten in perfection, should be young and not gathered or shelled long before it is dressed. Shell the peas, wash them well in cold water and drain them, then put them into a saucepan with plenty of fast boiling water, to which salt and moist sugar have been added in the above proportion. Let them boil quickly over a brisk fire, with the lid of the saucepan uncovered, and be careful that the smoke does not draw in. When tender, pour them into a colander, put them into a hot vegetable dish, and quite in the centre of the peas place a piece of butter, the size of a walnut. Many cooks boil a small bunch of mint with the peas, or garnish them with it by boiling a few sprigs in a saucepan by themselves. Should the peas be very old and difficult to boil a good colour, a very tiny piece of soda may be thrown in the water previous to putting them in, but this must be very sparingly used, as it causes the peas, when boiled, to have a smashed and broken appearance. With young peas there is not the slightest occasion to use it. Time. Young peas 10 to 15 minutes, the large sorts, such as marrowfats, etc., 18 to 24 minutes, old peas half an hour. Average cost, when cheapest, 6d. per peck, when first in season, 1 shilling to 1 shilling 6d. per peck. Sufficient. Allow 1 peck of unshelled peas for 4 or 5 persons. Seasonable from June to the end of August. Origin of the pea. All the varieties of garden peas which are cultivated have originated from the Pisum sativum, a native of the south of Europe, and field peas are varieties of Pisum arvens. The everlasting pea is Lathyrus latifolius, an old favourite in flower gardens. It is said to yield an abundance of honey to bees, which are remarkably fond of it. In this country the pea has been grown from time immemorial, but its culture seems to have diminished since the more general introduction of herbage, plants, and roots. Green peas à la Française, 1134. Ingredients. 2 quarts of green peas, 3 oz. of fresh butter, a bunch of parsley, 6 green onions, flour, a small lump of sugar, half a teaspoonful of salt, a teaspoonful of flour. Mode. Shell sufficient fresh gathered peas to fill 2 quarts, put them into cold water with the above proportion of butter, and stir them about until they are well covered with the butter. Drain them in a colander and put them in a stewpan with the parsley and onions. Dredge over them a little flour, stir the peas well and moisten them with boiling water. Boil them quickly over a large fire for 20 minutes, or until there is no liquor remaining. Dip a small lump of sugar into some water, that it may soon melt. Put it with the peas, to which add half a teaspoonful of salt. Take a piece of butter the size of a walnut, work it together with a teaspoonful of flour, and add this to the peas, which should be boiling when it is put in. Keep shaking the stewpan, and when the peas are nicely thickened, dress them high in the dish and serve. Time. Altogether 3/4 of an hour. Average cost 6d. per peck. Sufficient for 4 or 5 persons. Seasonable from June to the end of August. Varieties of the pea. The varieties of the pea are numerous, but they may be divided into 2 classes: those grown for the ripened seed, and those grown for gathering in a green state. The culture of the latter is chiefly confined to the neighbourhoods of large towns, and may be considered as in part rather to belong to the operations of the gardener than to those of the agriculturist. The grey varieties are the early grey, the late grey, and the purple grey, to which some add the Marlborough grey and the horn grey. The white varieties grown in fields are the Pearl, Early Charlton, Golden Hotspur, the common white or Suffolk, and other Suffolk varieties. Stewed green peas. 1135. INGREDIENTS. 1 quart of peas, 1 lettuce, 1 onion, 2 oz. Of butter, pepper, and salt to taste, 1 egg, 1/2 teaspoonful of powdered sugar. Mode. Shell the peas and cut the onion and lettuce into slices. Put these into a stewpan with the butter, pepper, and salt, but with no more water than that which hangs round the lettuce from washing. Stew the whole very gently for rather more than 1 hour, then stir to it a well-beaten egg and about 1/2 teaspoonful of powdered sugar. When the peas, etc., are nicely thickened, serve, but after the egg is added, do not allow them to boil. Time. 1 1/4 hours. Average cost, 6d. per peck. Sufficient for 3 or 4 persons. Seasonable from June to the end of August. The sweet pea and the heath or wood pea. The well-known sweet pea forms a fine covering to a trellis or lattice work in a flower garden. Its gay and fragrant flowers, with its rambling habit, render it peculiarly adapted for such a purpose. The wood pea or heath pea is found in the heaths of Scotland, and the Highlanders of that country are extremely partial to them, and dry and chew them to give a greater relish to their whisky. They also regard them as good against chest complaints, and say that by the use of them they are enabled to withstand hunger and thirst for a long time. The peas have a sweet taste, somewhat like the root of licorice, and when boiled have an agreeable flavour and are nutritive. In times of scarcity they have served as an article of food. When well boiled, a fork will pass through them, and slightly dried they are roasted, and in Holland and Flanders served up like chestnuts. Baked potatoes. 1136. INGREDIENTS. Potatoes. Mode. Choose large potatoes, as much of a size as possible. Wash them in lukewarm water and scrub them well, for the brown skin of a baked potato is by many persons considered the better part of it. Put them into a moderate oven and bake them for about 2 hours, turning them 3 or 4 times whilst they are cooking. Serve them in a napkin immediately they are done, as if kept for a long time in the oven they have a shrivelled appearance. Potatoes may also be roasted before the fire in an American oven, but when thus cooked they must be done very slowly. Do not forget to send to table with them a piece of cold butter. Time. Large potatoes in a hot oven 1 1/2 hours to 2 hours, in a cool oven 2 to 2 1/2 hours. Average cost 4 shillings per bushel. Sufficient. Allow 2 to each person. Seasonable all the year, but not good just before and whilst new potatoes are in season. Potato sugar. This sugary substance, found in the tubers of potatoes, is obtained in the form of a syrup or treacle, and has not yet been crystallized. It resembles the sugar of grapes, has a very sweet taste, and may be used for making sweetmeats and as a substitute for honey. 60 lbs. Of potatoes, yielding 8 lbs. Of dry starch, will produce 7½ lbs. Of sugar. In Russia it is extensively made, as good, though of less consistency than the treacle obtained from cane sugar. A spirit is also distilled from the tubers, which resembles brandy, but is milder and has a flavour as if it were charged with the odour of violets or raspberries. In France this manufacture is carried on pretty extensively, and 500 lbs. Of the tubers will produce 12 quarts of spirit, the pulp being given to cattle. To boil potatoes. 1137. INGREDIENTS. 10 or 12 potatoes. To each ½ gallon of water allow 1 heaped tablespoonful of salt. Mode. Choose potatoes of an equal size, pare them, take out all the eyes and specks, and as they are peeled, throw them into cold water. Put them into a saucepan, with sufficient cold water to cover them, with salt in the above proportion, and let them boil gently until tender. Ascertain when they are done by thrusting a fork in them, and take them up the moment they feel soft through, for if they are left in the water afterwards they become waxy or watery. Drain away the water, put the saucepan by the side of the fire with the lid partially uncovered to allow the steam to escape, and let the potatoes get thoroughly dry, and do not allow them to get burnt. Their superfluous moisture will evaporate, and the potatoes, if a good sort, should be perfectly mealy and dry. Potatoes vary so much in quality and size that it is difficult to give the exact time for boiling. They should be attentively watched and probed with a fork to ascertain when they are cooked. Send them to table quickly and very hot, and with an opening in the cover of the dish that a portion of the steam may evaporate and not fall back on the potatoes. Time. Moderate-sized old potatoes 15 to 20 minutes after the water boils, large ones ½ an hour to 35 minutes. Average cost 4 shillings per bushel, sufficient for 6 persons, seasonable all the year, but not good just before and whilst new potatoes are in season. Note. To keep potatoes hot, after draining the water from them, put a folded cloth or flannel, kept for the purpose, on the top of them, keeping the saucepan lid partially uncovered. This will absorb the moisture and keep them hot some time without spoiling. The potato. The potato belongs to the family of the Solanaceae, the greater number of which inhabit the tropics, and the remainder are distributed over the temperate regions of both hemispheres, but do not extend to the Arctic and Antarctic zones. The whole of the family are suspicious, a great number are narcotic, and many are deleterious. The roots partake of the properties of the plant, and are sometimes even more active. The tubercles of such as produce them are amylaceous and nutritive, as in those of the potato. The leaves are generally narcotic, but they lose this principle in boiling, as is the case with the Solanum nigrum, which are used as a vegetable when cooked. To boil potatoes in their jackets. 1138. Ingredients: 10 or 12 potatoes. To each half a gallon of water allow 1 heaped tablespoonful of salt. Mode. To obtain this wholesome and delicious vegetable cooked in perfection, it should be boiled and sent to table with the skin on. In Ireland, where perhaps the cooking of potatoes is better understood than in any country, they are always served so. Wash the potatoes well, and if necessary, use a clean scrubbing brush to remove the dirt from them, and if possible, choose the potatoes so that they may all be as nearly the same size as possible. When thoroughly cleansed, fill the saucepan half full with them, and just cover the potatoes with cold water, salted in the above proportion. They are more quickly boiled with a small quantity of water, and besides are more savoury than when drowned in it. Bring them to boil, then draw the pan to the side of the fire, and let them simmer gently until tender. Ascertain when they are done by probing them with a fork, then pour off the water, uncover the saucepan, and let the potatoes dry by the side of the fire, taking care not to let them burn. Peel them quickly, put them in a very hot vegetable dish, either with or without a napkin, and serve very quickly. After potatoes are cooked, they should never be entirely covered up, as the steam, instead of escaping, falls down on them, and makes them watery and insipid. In Ireland, they are usually served up with the skins on, and a small plate is placed by the side of each guest. Time. Moderate-sized potatoes with their skins on, 20 to 25 minutes after the water boils. Large potatoes, 25 minutes to 3/4 of an hour or longer, 5 minutes to dry them. Average cost, 4s. per bushel. Sufficient for 6 persons. Seasonable all the year, but not good just before and whilst new potatoes are in season. Analysis of the potato. Next to the cereals, the potato is the most valuable plant for the production of human food. Its tubers, according to analysis conducted by Mr. Fromberg in the laboratory of the Agricultural Chemical Association in Scotland, contain the following ingredients: 75.52% of water, 15.72 starch, 0.55 dextrine, 3.3 of impure saccharine matter, and 3.25 of fibre with coagulated albumin. In a dried state, the tuber contains 64.2% of starch, 2.25 of dextrine, 13.47 of impure saccharine matter, 5.77 of casein, gluten, and albumin, 1 of fatty matter, and 13.31 of fibre with coagulated albumin. To boil new potatoes. 1139. Ingredients: potatoes. To each half gallon of water allow 1 heaped tablespoonful of salt. Mode. Do not have the potatoes dug long before they are dressed, as they are never good when they have been out of the ground some time. Well wash them, rub off the skins with a coarse cloth, and put them into boiling water, salted in the above proportion. Let them boil until tender, try them with a fork, and when done, pour the water away from them. Let them stand by the side of the fire with the lid of the saucepan partially uncovered, and when the potatoes are thoroughly dry, put them into a hot vegetable dish with a piece of butter the size of a walnut. Pile the potatoes over this and serve. If the potatoes are too old to have the skins rubbed off, boil them in their jackets, drain, peel, and serve them as above, with a piece of butter placed in the midst of them. Time. 1/4 to half an hour, according to the size. Average cost, in full season, 1d. per pound. Sufficient. Allow 3 pounds for 5 or 6 persons. Seasonable in May and June, but may be had forced in March. Potato starch. This fecula has a beautiful white crystalline appearance, and is inodorous, soft to the touch, insoluble in cold, but readily soluble in boiling water. It is on this starch that the nutritive properties of the tubers depend. As an aliment, it is well adapted for invalids and persons of delicate constitution. It may be used in the form of arrowroot, and eaten with milk or sugar. For pastry of all kinds, it is more light and easier of digestion than that made with flour of wheat. In confectionery, it serves to form creams and jellies, and in cookery, may be used to thicken soups and sauces. It accommodates itself to the chest and stomach of children, for whom it is well adapted, and it is an aliment that cannot be too generally used, as much on account of its wholesomeness as its cheapness, and the ease with which it is kept, which are equal, if not superior, to all the much vaunted exotic feculae, as salep, tapioca, sago, and arrowroot. To steam potatoes. 1140. Ingredients: potatoes, boiling water. Mode. This mode of cooking potatoes is now much in vogue, particularly where they are wanted on a large scale, it being so very convenient. Pare the potatoes, throw them into cold water as they are peeled, then put them into a steamer. Place the steamer over a saucepan of boiling water and steam the potatoes from 20 to 40 minutes, according to the size and sort. When a fork goes easily through them, they are done, then take them up, dish, and serve very quickly. Time 20 to 40 minutes, average cost 4s. per bushel. Sufficient, allow 2 large potatoes to each person. Seasonable all the year, but not so good whilst new potatoes are in season. Uses of the potato. Potatoes boiled and beaten along with sour milk form a sort of cheese, which is made in Saxony, and when kept in close vessels may be preserved for several years. It is generally supposed that the water in which potatoes are boiled is injurious, and as instances are recorded where cattle having drunk it were seriously affected, it may be well to err on the safe side, and avoid its use for any alimentary purpose. Potatoes which have been exposed to the air and become green are very unwholesome. Cadet de Vaux asserts that potatoes will clean linen as well as soap, and it is well known that the berries of the S. saponaceum are used in Peru for the same purpose. How to use cold potatoes. 1141. Ingredients. The remains of cold potatoes. To every pound allow 2 tablespoonfuls of flour, 2 ditto of minced onions, 1 oz of butter, milk. Mode. Mash the potatoes with a fork until perfectly free from lumps, stir in the other ingredients and add sufficient milk to moisten them well. Press the potatoes into a mould and bake in a moderate oven until nicely brown, which will be in from 20 minutes to half an hour. Turn them out of the mould and serve. Time 20 minutes to half an hour. Seasonable at any time. Potato bread. The manner in which this is made is very simple. The adhesive tendency of the flour of the potato acts against its being baked or kneaded without being mixed with wheaten flour or meal. It may, however, be made into cakes in the following manner. A small wooden frame, nearly square, is laid on a pan like a frying pan, and is grooved, and so constructed that by means of a presser or lid introduced into the groove, the cake is at once fashioned, according to the dimensions of the mould. The frame containing the farina may be almost immediately withdrawn after the mould is formed upon the pan, because from the consistency imparted to the incipient cake by the heat, it will speedily admit of being safely handled. It must not, however, be fried too hastily. It will then eat very palatably, and might from time to time be soaked for puddings, like tapioca, or might be used like the cassada cake, for, when well buttered and toasted, it will be found an excellent accompaniment to breakfast. In Scotland, cold boiled potatoes are frequently squeezed up and mixed with flour or oatmeal, and an excellent cake or scone obtained. Fried potatoes, French fashion. 1142. Ingredients. Potatoes, hot butter or clarified dripping, salt. Mode. Peel and cut the potatoes into thin slices, as nearly the same size as possible. Make some butter or dripping quite hot in a frying pan, put in the potatoes and fry them on both sides of a nice brown. When they are crisp and done, take them up, place them on a cloth before the fire to drain the grease from them, and serve very hot, after sprinkling them with salt. These are delicious with rump steak, and in France are frequently served thus as a breakfast dish. The remains of cold potatoes may also be sliced and fried by the above recipe, but the slices must be cut a little thicker. Time. Sliced raw potatoes 5 minutes, cooked potatoes 5 minutes. Average cost 4s. per bushel. Sufficient 6 sliced potatoes for 3 persons. Seasonable at any time. A German method of cooking potatoes. 1143. Ingredients. 8 to 10 middling-sized potatoes, 3 oz of butter, 2 tablespoonfuls of flour, half a pint of broth, 2 tablespoonfuls of vinegar. Mode. Put the butter and flour into a stewpan, stir over the fire until the butter is of a nice brown colour, and add the broth and vinegar. Peel and cut the potatoes into long thin slices, lay them in the gravy, and let them simmer gently until tender, which will be in from 10 to 15 minutes, and serve very hot. A laurel leaf simmered with the potatoes is an improvement. Time 10 to 15 minutes. Seasonable at any time. Preserving potatoes. In general, potatoes are stored or preserved in pits, cellars, pies, or camps, but whatever mode is adopted, it is essential that the tubers be perfectly dry, otherwise they will surely rot, and a few rotten potatoes will contaminate a whole mass. The pie, as it is called, consists of a trench, lined and covered with straw, the potatoes in it being piled in the shape of a house roof, to the height of about 3 feet. The camps are shallow pits, filled and ridged up in a similar manner, covered up with the excavated mould of the pit. In Russia and Canada the potato is preserved in boxes, in houses or cellars, heated, when necessary, to a temperature 1 or 2 degrees above the freezing point by stoves. To keep potatoes for a considerable time, the best way is to place them in thin layers on a platform suspended in an ice cellar. There, the temperature being always below that of active vegetation, they will not sprout. while not being above 1 or 2 degrees below the freezing point, the tubers will not be frostbitten. Another mode is to scoop out the eyes with a very small scoop and keep the roots buried in earth. A third mode is to destroy the vital principle by kiln drying, steaming, or scalding. A fourth is to bury them so deep in dry soil that no change of temperature will reach them, and thus being without air they will remain upwards of a year without vegetating. Potatoes à la maître d'hôtel. 1144. Ingredients: potatoes, salt and water. To every 6 potatoes allow 1 tablespoonful of minced parsley, 2 ounces of butter, pepper and salt to taste, 4 tablespoonfuls of gravy, 2 tablespoonfuls of lemon juice. Mode: wash the potatoes clean and boil them in salt and water by recipe No. 1138. When they are done, drain them, let them cool, then peel and cut the potatoes into thick slices. If these are too thin, they would break in the sauce. Put the butter into a stewpan with the pepper, salt, gravy, and parsley. Mix these ingredients well together. Put in the potatoes, shake them 2 or 3 times that they may be well covered with the sauce, and when quite hot through, squeeze in the lemon juice and serve. Time, 1/2 to 3/4 hour to boil the potatoes, 10 minutes for them to heat in the sauce. Average cost 4 shillings per bushel. Sufficient for 3 persons. Seasonable all the year. Mashed potatoes. 1145. Ingredients: potatoes. To every pound of mashed potatoes allow 1 ounce of butter, 2 tablespoonfuls of milk, salt to taste. Mode: boil the potatoes in their skins. When done, drain them and let them get thoroughly dry by the side of the fire. Then peel them, and as they are peeled, put them into a clean saucepan, and with a large fork beat them to a light paste. Add butter, milk, and salt in the above proportion, and stir all the ingredients well over the fire. When thoroughly hot, dish them lightly, and draw the fork backwards over the potatoes to make the surface rough, and serve. When dressed in this manner, they may be browned at the top with a salamander, or before the fire. Some cooks press the potatoes into moulds, then turn them out, and brown them in the oven. This is a pretty mode of serving, but it makes them heavy. In whatever way they are sent to the table, care must be taken to have them quite free from lumps. Time, from 1/2 to 3/4 hour to boil the potatoes. Average cost, 4 shillings per bushel. Sufficient 1 pound of mashed potatoes for 3 persons. Seasonable at any time. Purée de pommes de terre, or very thin mashed potatoes. 1146. Ingredients: to every pound of mashed potatoes allow 1/4 pint of good broth or stock, 2 ounces of butter. Mode: boil the potatoes, well drain them, and pound them smoothly in a mortar or beat them up with a fork. Add the stock or broth and rub the potatoes through a sieve. Put the purée into a very clean saucepan with the butter, stir it well over the fire until thoroughly hot, and it will then be ready to serve. A purée should be rather thinner than mashed potatoes, and is a delicious accompaniment to delicately broiled mutton cutlets. Cream or milk may be substituted for the broth when the latter is not at hand. A casserole of potatoes, which is often used for ragout instead of rice, is made by mashing potatoes rather thickly, placing them on a dish, and making an opening in the centre. After having browned the potatoes in the oven, the dish should be wiped clean, and the ragout or fricassee poured in. Time, about 1/2 hour to boil the potatoes, 6 or 7 minutes to warm the purée. Average cost, 4 shillings per bushel. Sufficient, allow 1 pound of cooked potatoes for 3 persons. Seasonable at any time. Varieties of the potato. These are very numerous. They differ, says an authority, in their leaves and bulk of harm, in the colour of the skin of the tubers, in the colour of the interior, compared with that of the skin, in the time of ripening, in being farinaceous, glutinous, or watery, in tasting agreeably or disagreeably, in cooking readily or tediously, in the length of the subterraneous stolones to which the tubers are attached, in blossoming or not blossoming, and finally in the soil which they prefer. The earliest varieties grown in fields are the early kidney, the nonsuch, the early shore, and the early champion. This last is the most generally cultivated round London. It is both mealy and hardy. The sweet potato is but rarely eaten in Britain, but in America it is often served at table, and is there very highly esteemed. Potato rissoles. 1147. Ingredients: mashed potatoes, salt and pepper to taste, when liked a very little minced parsley, egg, and breadcrumbs. Mode: boil and mash the potatoes by recipe No. 1145, add a seasoning of pepper and salt, and when liked, a little minced parsley. Roll the potatoes into small balls, cover them with egg and breadcrumbs, and fry in a hot lard for about 10 minutes. Let them drain before the fire, dish them on a napkin, and serve. Time, 10 minutes to fry the rissoles. Seasonable at any time. Note: the flavour of these rissoles may be very much increased by adding finely minced tongue or ham, or even chopped onions when these are liked. Qualities of potatoes. In making a choice from the many varieties of potatoes which are everywhere found, the best way is to get a sample and taste them, and then fix upon the kind which best pleases your palate. The Shaw is one of the most esteemed of the early potatoes for field culture, and the kidney and breadfruit are also good sorts. The Lancashire Pink is also a good potato and is much cultivated in the neighbourhood of Liverpool. As late or long-keeping potatoes, the tartan or red apple stands very high in favour. Potato Snow 1148. Ingredients: potatoes, salt and water. Mode. Choose large white potatoes, as free from spots as possible. Boil them in their skins in salt and water until perfectly tender. Drain and dry them thoroughly by the side of the fire, and peel them. Put a hot dish before the fire, rub the potatoes through a coarse sieve onto this dish, do not touch them afterwards or the flakes will fall, and serve as hot as possible. Time, 1/2 to 3/4 hour to boil the potatoes. Average cost, 4s. per bushel. Sufficient 6 potatoes for 3 persons. Seasonable at any time. The potato as an article of human food. This valuable esculent, next to wheat, is of the greatest importance in the eye of the political economist. From no other crop that can be cultivated does the public derive so much benefit, and it has been demonstrated that an acre of potatoes will feed double the number of people that can be fed from an acre of wheat. To dress salsify 1149. Ingredients: salsify. To each 1/2 gallon of water allow 1 heaped tablespoonful of salt, 1 oz. of butter, 2 tablespoonfuls of lemon juice. Mode. Scrape the roots gently so as to strip them only of their outside peel. Cut them into pieces about 4 inches long, and as they are peeled, throw them into water with which has been mixed a little lemon juice to prevent their discolouring. Put them into boiling water with salt, butter, and lemon juice in the above proportion, and let them boil rapidly until tender. Try them with a fork, and when it penetrates easily, they are done. Drain the salsify and serve with a good white sauce or French melted butter. Time, 30 to 50 minutes. Seasonable in winter. Note, this vegetable may be also boiled, sliced, and fried in batter of a nice brown. When crisp and a good colour, they should be served with fried parsley in the centre of the dish and a little fine salt sprinkled over the salsify. Salsify. This esculent is, for the sake of its roots, cultivated in gardens. It belongs to the composite class of flowers, which is the most extensive family in the vegetable kingdom. This family is not only one of the most natural and most uniform in structure, but there is also a great similarity existing in the properties of the plants of which it is composed. Generally speaking, all composite flowers are tonic or stimulant in their medical virtues. Boiled sea kale 1150. Ingredients: to each 1/2 gallon of water allow 1 heaped tablespoonful of salt. Mode. Well wash the kale, cut away any worm-eaten pieces, and tie it into small bunches. Put it into boiling water, salted in the above proportion, and let it boil quickly until tender. Take it out, drain, untie the bunches, and serve with plain melted butter or white sauce, a little of which may be poured over the kale. Sea kale may also be parboiled and stewed in good brown gravy. It will then take about 1/2 hour altogether. Time, 15 minutes. When liked very thoroughly done, allow an extra 5 minutes. Average cost, in full season, 9d. per basket. Sufficient, allow 12 heads for 4 or 5 persons. Seasonable from February to June. Sea kale. This plant belongs to the asparagus tribe, and grows on seashores, especially in the west of England and in the neighbourhood of Dublin. Although it is now in very general use, it did not come into repute till 1794. It is easily cultivated, and is esteemed as one of the most valuable esculents indigenous to Britain. As a vegetable, it is stimulating to the appetite, easily digestible, and nutritious. It is so light that the most delicate organisations may readily eat it. The flowers form a favourite resort for bees, as their petals contain a great amount of saccharine matter. End of section 56.